Great. Welcome to the growing role of online platforms in a post-pandemic Mexico. I am Leanne Muchler of Alumni Relations for the West Coast and Latin America. This event is being co-hosted by the Chicago Booth Alumni Club of Mexico, as well as the Polsky Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Today, we have fabulous speakers on our panel, including our moderator, Eric Wolston, who is an MBA from 2004 and the co-founder and partner of Adobe Capital. Our panelists include Federico Raniero from 2012, who is the COO of Kavak, and Kristen Barrett, MBA 2012, who is the CEO and Director of Enterprise Learning of the Collective Academy, and Ricardo Martinez Finger, who is a 2013 graduate and the co-founder and COO of Justo. I will be in the background for admin needs. But other than that, I'm going to pass it off to our moderator and host, Eric Wolston. Eric?
Thank you very much. And good morning or good afternoon or good evening for all of you connecting from wherever you are in the world. We have a chat, so if any of you want to share where you are in the world today, we can read those back and see kind of what type of global reach this event has. As mentioned earlier, I'm Eric Wolston. I'm a co-founder of Adobe Capital. We're an impact investment fund based in Mexico that invests in Latin America. We basically invest in social and entrepreneurial and environmental ventures throughout Latin America with a focus on royalty-based financing. And before we jump into some interesting questions, I'll let everybody present themselves quickly and briefly, since you might not exactly know what Collective Academy, Justo, and Kavak are. They're starting to become household names every day. I think I see them more and more in the press, but I'll let them give a little more background for those of you who are not as familiar with what they do. So Kristen, we'll start with you.
For sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Barrett. As Leanne mentioned, I am class of 2012. Fede and I were classmates, and Ricardo as well, basically. So it's a very small world. Chicagoan born and raised, and spent the past 5 years of my career at University of Chicago, actually. And about 6 months ago, joined Collective Academy. We're what we call a challenger university, so we're really trying to disrupt the educational system in Latin America. Our flagship product is a master's in business and technology, and during the pandemic, we launched a new product called Compass, which is a gap year program for 18 to 22-year-olds who are trying to figure out where they're going to go with their lives. We're really proud of those programs, and then we do a lot of work with corporate leaders in the region for different types of learning development training programs. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you. Federico, on to you.
Hey guys, pleasure to be here. I'm Fede, CEO of Kavak and board member. Kavak, we are a used car marketplace. Basically, we operate a C2B2C model. We purchase cars, we recondition them, we sell them, we offer financing and warranties, opportunities, and return policies, etc. We were recently in the news as the first Mexican unicorn, which has been an enormous source of pride and gratitude, but frankly, much more. And the reason why we decided to do so is because we know there will be many more, and we wanted to become a source of inspiration for others. I don't know, many in the room today, including attendees, will continue to have those enormous stories of success in Mexico. I remember the last time we were in a panel with Waverly at the beginning of the year here at our booth. One of her questions was, why aren't there any Mexican unicorns? And that's one of the reasons why we decided to communicate this as opposed to previous founding rounds, because we really want to demonstrate, and the guys here today are an example of that Mexico does have that technology, does have the talent, does have the market. And I think that we will continue to see amazing stories out there, and really proud to be here today with you guys.
Great, thank you. And finally, Ricardo, tell us a little more about Justo.
Hey, hi everyone. So I'm Ricardo Martinez. I'm Brazilian, living in Mexico for the last 5 years, which is great because I had the chance to see a little bit how the market here evolve. So it's great. We can talk a little bit later. So I'm with Justo. I'm CEO of Justo, which is an online supermarket nowadays in Mexico City and Querétaro, but in the future the whole nation, whole country, and also in Latin America. So no, nothing more. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that all three of you were in the same class in Booth. There's probably some even more interesting TNDC stories, which we'll have to leave for another panel. But I think we can kick it off with, something around the pandemic. And I think, all three of you are, driving enterprises that are really focused on the increasing adoption of online connections and just marketplaces and just e-commerce and everything that's going online. Now, did any of you think that this adoption would be so quick as it has been right now with COVID? And do you think that this is kind of a temporary thing and people will get back to normal? Mexico is a country where historically people like to do business face to face, not so much in front of screen. And so what's your prediction for the adoption of online platforms in Mexico? And is this something that's here to stay, or is it something that'll go back to normal? Why don't we switch it up a bit? And Ricardo, maybe you can tell us what you're seeing at Justo.
Sure, that's a fantastic question. First of all, I've been living here for 5 years, all of them in digital business. So we always were sure about there would be a tipping point where the adoption would come. So we've been investing in Mexico maybe for 5 years in my previous company, but nobody saw this coming, right? So I think it was unbelievable what happened. Early this March, mid-March, I slept one day with 200 orders, and the following day it was 600. So it was crazy. So nobody had the time to adapt. So we had to be very creative and build things from one day to another to solve the problem. No, and the companies that were building its digital strategy at their own pace, right now they have to hurry, right? So I believe that that this trend is here to stay. Mexico was a little bit behind other countries regarding internet adoption, mainly United States, Asia. Here, internet adoption prior to COVID was between 1 and 2%. In my sector, groceries, it was less than 1%. And nowadays, I don't have the data yet, but I think the penetration could easily triple on this time, right? So I believe it's here to stay. People is getting much more familiarized with the internet. The fintechs are doing a great job to give access to payment methods to the population. So I think it's here to stay. It's a trend, and we have to capitalize on that. Thank you.
And for education, Kristen, I mean, are schools going to go back to in person, and this will be like a bad memory, or is a part of online learning always going to be with us from now on? What do you think?
It's a great question. I mean, I think that there's always going to be a priority for some sort of in-person learning. The experience, I think, as we all know from our own educations, is somewhat unparalleled, frankly. But we had, going into this pandemic, one online cohort, and we moved all of the rest online in a span of 4 days. And what's been really interesting is throughout this, we've been talking very actively with our students, our master's students, and asking them sort of, do they want to go back to being in person? Do they feel safe going back to being in person? And most of them don't feel safe yet, which I think is completely reasonable, and we don't either. But they are liking some things about the online model a lot. In a city like Mexico City or other big cities throughout Latin America, something like traffic matters a lot. So you could be spending an hour commuting to school, and that's a real drain on your day when you're working full time. I think for us, that's going to be a big factor going forward, is figuring out how do we do some online and some in person, so you don't lose the networking and everything else that comes with being in person, but you also aren't wasting a lot of time doing things that are non-productive, like sitting in your car.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you for that. And Federico, when, 20 years ago, when the dot-com, boom came and everything was, .com, it was, pets.com and food.com. And there was actually a cars.com that tried to sell cars online. And I'm one of those who said that's never going to happen. You want to get in the car, you want to press the buttons, you want to turn on the engine. What's happened? I mean, are people actually going to start buying cars if they can online, or what's the niche that you're seeing there?
Yeah, they are. Hopefully, they will continue to do so, or else I won't have a project here. But yeah, I mean, frankly, and to your original question, how did we expect this was going to behave? We were seeing great signs. Like we were really betting on, adopting new customers and on changing the behavior of existing customers in their subsequent transactions, because after sales is a big piece for us, right? Like we do service, maintenance, refinancing, etc. And what we do see is once you capture a client, you see how they change their behavior after they start trusting you. So many of those subsequent transactions will be much more touchless and like the ones we are intending to actually capture from the get-go. But what the pandemic did for us is basically push that enormously, right? I mean, we were definitely betting on that curve to continue to grow, but we didn't expect it to behave this way. With more feeling than data, to be frank, but we estimate that this pushed us no less than 10 years in the adoption that we had estimated before. I think a good benchmark that I like to use, and in terms of the penetration of e-commerce generally, is the penetration of e-commerce relative to retail, because it's a widely accessible metric. In Mexico today, we had that at around 1.7%. Back in the day, in 2013, after our MBA, when I jumped to tech in Linio, one of the first e-commerce platforms in Mexico, it was around 0.5%. But then you see other countries, even in Latam, and they're at 5, 6, 7%. In other developed countries, they're about 10%. So we were betting on that significantly, but this has definitely made the shift. And I think what happened here is basically people had no option but to adopt these platforms. If you're sitting at home and you definitely have to bet on trusting a card not present transaction, or trusting someone to deliver your groceries. And it could be as simple as ordering your groceries or a burger or an Uber. But then when the lack of alternatives exists and everything is closed, you start exploring more and more things. And that's when we saw that, for example, immediately when the pandemic hit, we saw an enormous volume, estimated around 10x, of people wanting to sell a vehicle to us. Why? Because they can do it by pushing a button and expecting us at homes. We go to their homes, we inspect the vehicles, and it could be as touchless as it is. And frankly, at that moment, we were a little bit scared, and we didn't know how long this was going to take. So we were a little bit careful, not buying tons of vehicles. We didn't know how long we're going to hold them in inventory, because we do have locations. We want to bridge that gap between what you say, people wanting to see the vehicles before purchasing them. You can buy a vehicle by pushing a button and trusting us, and you can return that vehicle in 7 days. But many people, the majority of people, I would say, 99% of those people chose before the pandemic to actually see the vehicle before purchasing it, by going to one of our showrooms, or by asking for us to take the vehicle to the places and then to check it out. Now, when we had to close the showrooms because of the situations, customers only had the choice and to either look at the video at the car via video call, or to expect that an at-home appointment. And what we're starting to see in there is an enormous bet of customers of actually trusting us and saying, okay, we're going to trust you. I literally want a new vehicle, etc. Around the value prop and what we offered in terms of financing and other opportunities that are not out there. We started to see some similar trends in the sales side. So we really have seen enormous benefits in there. This has been a magnificent opportunity for us to innovate, in terms of product solutions. Like, for example, when we saw all of those people wanting to sell those vehicles to us, we also saw that many of them really wanted the money. They also wanted to keep the vehicle. They needed the vehicle. So we started innovating with fintech solutions like an auto equity loan. So get a loan backed up by your car, or we can refinance your car. If you have finance somewhere else, we can refinance it. You can get better terms. Or similarly, in the sales side, video calls to check out the vehicle and taking the vehicle to your home and pushing really the value props on the return policies and the warranties and extended warranties, etc. And you start seeing that customers actually trust you, and that word of mouth effect really kicks in. And referrals is a big part of a business. You really, when you're looking for a vehicle, you ask people around, where did you find it? And when you find someone had a great experience and the business back you up. And the reason for us being a C2B2C model has to do a lot with the fact that we want to be a business providing that safety and that quality value prop to customers in every pieces of the process. That has been key for us, and we're seeing great trends to the point where we're now betting on expanding pretty aggressively in both within Mexico and internationally, in Argentina and Brazil and many more countries and cities in Mexico, because of this great adoption that we've seen.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Well, I don't know who still have probably the rights for cars.com, but he's probably happy that you guys are doing what you're doing. So without this is a quicker question for all three of you. Without mentioning your own vertical or your own industry, which one do you think are going to be, the most benefited from what's happening right now? I'll let you answer as you want.
I think overall the consumer sector is growing leaps and bounds. I mean, I've only been in Mexico for about a year and a half now, and I've seen the selection of products that are available for purchase online grow significantly, not only in sort of what's available, but also sort of number of SKUs, the number of transactions that are getting approved versus having some sort of trouble with your credit card to be processed online, things like that, have already improved pretty significantly. And I think that's going to drive massive adoption in the consumer sector for the convenience factor and obviously for the safety in the COVID situation.
Sure. I mean, I believe everything sector that are essential to the economy will do very good during pandemic. So groceries, supermarkets, CPGs, agrotech, also healthcare. So all of this will take advantage of the pandemic. But I believe at the long run, every company that's trying to make this change into digital, if it's a serious change, can be pretty much beneficial. So I would bet in the transform digitization of the company. So it's a movement that we are seeing pretty aggressively right now in Mexico. Yeah, that's it.
I agree with everything that's been said. I would just complement with two sectors that I'm pretty bullish about in Mexico. One is definitely fintech and everything that it entails, and that's a big piece of what we do. To the point where, to give you an idea, in the used car market in Mexico generally, it's a $60 billion market. 80% of transactions are peer-to-peer. No player has more than 0.5%, and that causes some of the frictions coupled with consumer preferences, like 56% of the population does not have a bank account. 92% of the population prefers to pay in cash. So there's big disruptions out there. And given those disruptions in the used vehicle market, we see that only 5% of sales are financed, right? And we're already financing close to 60% with our fintech arm. So definitely that has been a key growth lever, and many companies are employing similar strategies with contactless payments and et cetera, to basically do the switch from cash to digital and contactless. And the other sector I mentioned is telemedicine. For sure, there are some interesting plays. One of them, and I'm happy to see him on the call, Ricardo Carvalho. He's the founder of one of these companies, Corotec. I'm a proud member of his board. And definitely we've seen some interesting behavior changes, and people don't want to go to a doctor in person, or if they can avoid it and do it over telemedicine, they can see some interesting things. And there are many innovations in that sector that I think are going to continue to materialize.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's an interesting crisis, because most crises tend to be economic in nature, and it tends to kind of basically lower all boats. And in this case, we're seeing some industries being adversely affected, but then others amazingly are doing better than ever. So it's an interesting, I think, a very singular situation we're living in right now. And that takes me a little to fundraising, and maybe Ricardo, you can chime in here, but this is kind of your second time around wanting to do this. And some people might call you a masochist, because fundraising is tough and it's hard, but obviously you're good at it. Have you seen any difference in fundraising now lately, more angel investors, more local investors? Is it the same ones, or is it instead, is it more and more VC funds in the US looking south? I mean, what would your trends or observations on that be right now?
Sure. Look, I've been in the market here for 5 years, and the ecosystem, I think it's very, very young, not older than 10 years. So we can see there is lots of good people here, great entrepreneurs, as Federico already told us. Very good ideas. I think there are people very focused, client focused. So there are several opportunities to rip out the friction between the in the different industries. So, and right now what we see is that international VCs are looking south maybe for the last 2 to 3 years. So we can mention a few of them. So General Atlantic, SoftBank, Foundation Group. So there are Founders Fund. So there are several. I believe this is a little bit because of the maturing of the market. So there are people doing great things here. Kavak is only one example. I want to congratulate Fede here and all the team. For long, we always talked about when we are going to have our first unicorn. I think it's a landmark. That's a special time that we needed. Nowadays we can probably tell we have our first unicorn, and this brings attention to the region, right? Not only Mexico, but also to Brazil, Argentina. Brazil had its first unicorn maybe 2 years ago. Argentina, the first one was Mercado Libre, the first one in Latin America. So I believe all of the funds are starting to look south much more frequent. In our side, in Justo, we have investments from Europe, from Russia, from the United States. So it's really interesting. It's a very tough job because you have to be always selling, but it's interesting that they are seeing the opportunity much bigger than they saw before. So we are pretty happy with them. We believe we have the full range right now of investors, since angel investors, seed investors, Series A, Series B, Series C. So we have right now the full range. A couple of years ago, we had very small funds that could invest in really early stage, but not in later stages, which is not the case anymore. We are very happy with that. We are seeing something that is really interesting, that successful Mexican or foreign entrepreneurs in Mexico are giving back to the environment. So many of the angel investors that we have right now in Mexico are people that already are in Series A, Series B, Series C. They are looking to smaller companies that are doing interesting things in putting checks between, I don't know, $10,000 to $100,000, which is really cool. I myself, I had the chance to invest in a couple of the companies, and it's really rewarding. Now we are creating this environment of, it's a virtuous cycle, no? So everyone is trying to help each other. When I arrived here, I remember that I wanted to start something, but I had no idea, I had no connections. The community was very open. I will be eternally grateful to some people here, and I believe this idea of giving back is very important, especially in early stages. So that's it. I think we are building something great here in Mexico. All the community. Fede is one of my role models here to follow, a foreigner in Mexico. So really happy. and I think good things will come.
That's great to hear. I think one of the key aspects of angel investing is people like yourselves eventually giving back, and more than money, it's your experience, it's your connections, and so hope you're all making a little reserve there in your piggy bank to give to other entrepreneurs in the next couple of years. That's great to hear. And shifting over to Kristen on education, one of the wonderful things about education is, that it's very easy to, reach your students online. One of the things I've heard is there's very low barriers to entry, and that, winner takes all, right? Someone with a lot of money who can basically offer courses for free for, the first 6-12 months could basically disrupt the market. What's Collective Academy doing there? What's your viewpoint on barriers to entry versus ease of deployment and education?
An interesting question. I think that you can do massive online courses and things like that. And to be honest, we do something very different. We have classes that are typically around 25 students. They're highly interactive. I think one of the big things that the reason it's worked for us so well to transition to Zoom and not have people just kind of watch and Zoom, zone out and not participate and not learn, quite frankly, is that we mainly use Socratic method, just like you'd see in an MBA course at Booth. So we have really active conversations based on the pre-reading that you did for both the master's program, but also our corporate training programs. And so I think those things have been really different. We've spent a lot of time thinking about the product itself and how do you make this optimized for the online experience. So I think we're using a lot of different tools, whether it's something as simple as breakout rooms and polling in Zoom, or creating business model canvases and all working on them with a tool like Miro. So I think for us, thinking about how you make that interaction a really positive one, a really rewarding one, and somewhere where you're taking away your learnings and actually applying them day to day in your work, because most of our students are full-time employees. It's super important to us.
Thank you for sharing that. And Federico, I echo the congratulations on your latest round. And let me be a little controversial here and give it a bit of a different spin. So when I'm an investor at Adobe Capital, been doing this for 20 years, and when I hear that you've kind of raised a round in the unicorn realm, what I think is, at least your last investor is going to want at least 3 times their money, maybe more. That means that the exit valuation has to be north of $3 billion. How does that play into it? Does that make you excited? Does that make you nervous? How is that changing the landscape, right? Because the one thing is raising, and the other thing is exiting. And I'm all about exiting right now in our investments. And how does that play into your thinking? I mean, it's a great place to be raising money right now and putting it to work, and then eventually exiting when the economy recovers. Much worse to be exiting right now. But how does that feel, and what do you think there?
Yeah, love the challenge and the controversy. Well, honestly, it doesn't feel any different than the past. Reality is, humility aside, our Series A and Series B have also been record-setting series, but we had never decided to communicate any of them. We decided to communicate this one precisely because we understood this was bigger than us, and this was about the entire ecosystem. But we understand that as any investment, this is a bet of the present value of our future cash flows. It's definitely not an achievement on itself in any mean whatsoever. But mostly, it's really about what we are going to continue to achieve in the future. And remember, here it's an interesting story in Kavak, because at the beginning, the whole evolution that we've seen from these funds that Ricardo was talking about, that has been changing for good. But at the beginning, and you know this better than us, Eric, it was very restrictive, right? It was really hard to raise capital. That skepticism was really much more prevalent. So the reality is that Kavak had to grow and create an environment with very positive unit economic trends and very sustainable customer experience and value prop. And that is one of the reasons why, for example, for the past 4 years, our entire history, we've been basically focused in one city. We just started to launch other cities, and trust me, that was not a lack of ambition or vision, right? It was simply because we really wanted to nail the back end, the model and the entire value prop and the pricing algorithms and the data science model and the machine learning algorithms that are predicting, how much do we need to invest on a vehicle and how much do we expect in terms of warranties, et cetera, and how can we use that data for us to understand what to check in a vehicle and what specifically to recondition in a vehicle, et cetera. That is really key for us for this business to function. And it was only once that we figured out that, and actually our guiding principles are 3 and in this order. Number 1, our team. It means us, our culture, our ability to attract, retain amazing people, diverse, that work well within each other, that are really passionate about what they do, et cetera. Number 2 is customer experience, right? And that means not only the typical NPS, et cetera, but it means how customers can vote with their feet and come back to us. Today they might have to buy or sell a vehicle. They might need to sell or refinance one in the future, et cetera. And they continue to show us that with their choices in the future. And number 3 is world-class economics, because we believe the third one is the result of the previous 2. If we have the right focus as we've had in the past, we take this as an amazing challenge and opportunity to deliver, but our vision is definitely one that is a long-term, not focused on evaluation per se, not focused on an IPO or a specific IPO evaluation or an exit of any sorts. We're thinking of this in terms of decades, because we understand that the transformations that we need to do in the market are so deep and so hard to solve in terms of information asymmetries and safety issues and financing constraints and warranty availability and sustainability of such products, et cetera, that we really are just in diapers here. So that's the way we see it. That being said, we do want to make an IPO, and that's probably going to happen in a couple of years, but that's not going to be an achievement as this one wasn't. That's going to be a simple milestone and another reflection of hopefully what will be a continuous bet on what we're expected to deliver in the future. So yeah, we take this with confidence, but with a great source of responsibility, and we're certainly really excited about the continuous transformation that we believe that we can continue to push through in our cities.
Thank you for that. Well, we're all rooting for you. Your success,
you.
all of our successes as an ecosystem. I mean, what each of us does really reflects on everybody else's. The types of decisions that we make when we fundraise and who we fundraise with and what types of exits we can generate is really going to be the exit that, or the success that we need, all of us together. So thank you for that. So Gilberto, who's connected, has a question which I think is pretty spot on. We've had a very controversial new federal administration where we've all kind of been, playing musical chairs the last 2 years with a bunch of different changes, both at the federal and local levels. So his question is, how's the political landscape impacting your growth or your businesses, fundraising? What are you doing about it? I mean, it's not affecting me, no one cares, it's a headache, or, this is something that could derail our business and we're looking at other countries. I'll let each of you respond if you want to.
Eric, I think for us, it's not necessarily as direct of an effect. I think we're working on being a very high quality player at a much more competitive price, because we're not doing things like big sprawling campuses and other things that are frankly costly pieces of education. Most of our in-person classes, for example, are held in co-working spaces. So hopefully they're close to the student and things like that. I think where politics probably has the biggest effect on us right now is trying to think about as we expand throughout Latin America, where we go and where we focus on. So it's not just politics in Mexico, it's sort of looking at the overall landscape of what does Latin America look like, and where does our model resonate, and where has, you know, the stability and the wherewithal to have a good group of students.
As for us, right now it didn't impact much. We are very focused internal and deliver the perfect solution to our client. So we're very client-centric. So we see our model as not as much as acquisition, but much more as cohort. So maintain and keep the client. So we are very worried right now in creating the perfect experience. So that's our issue. Right now, we don't think much more about governments and politics, all of this. I suppose it could be an issue in the future when we are seeing, for example, an exit, but I don't see this in the short term. For example, if you guys follow Corner Shop, you saw that they had problems with when they sold to Walmart. The deal was fell through. So after right now they are selling to Uber, and all of the deal is done in Latin America, but not in Mexico. So it could be we could have problems in the future, but we are not worried right now. With this, the main reason is that we don't see many exit options as the people who can buy us, but many more. We are much more focused on and grow right now. So we are not worried right now, and we prefer to stay a little bit aside.
Yeah, I'd share my own perspective. Certainly, my focus on policy has changed quite a bit. In recently, I was previously a general manager of Uber in Mexico, and that was keeping me up at night in many ways. Certainly, you have tons of flavors of regulation at the state level. They will go from literally blocking you and not allowing you to launch, because if you do, it would put at risk of imprisonment of the drivers if they're caught riding people from A to B. To other regulations that are focused on safety and on certain procedures, etc., but do allow for and promote competition, and certainly are focused on letting customers choose. So a lot of the focus there was definitely trying to be very fierce about saying, we do want to be regulated, but we want a regulation that actually allows us to compete, and it's not that allows the customer to choose based on their needs, and that doesn't particularly protect specific interest groups, which tend to be the taxis or some syndicates that have tremendous political power and economical influence in some of the governments. That is so sad to see. In Quebec, I'd say we don't see any of that. Frankly, what we see is we're actually bringing a lot of formalization to a market that has 80% of transactions that are peer-to-peer. We're certainly buying, reconditioning, selling vehicles in a formal way, and what we're trying to push through in our policy agenda are common grounds of collaboration where we can be parts of the solution. And one example of that is, for example, the digitalization of some of the paperwork associated with the vehicle, right? Which, as part of our value prop of after sales, we have an app. It's called Quebec 360. That's the ecosystem where our value prop is push a button to solve any mechanical or legal related paperwork issue about your vehicle, and you can wait for us at your home. And many of those paperwork issues, depending on the state, are simpler or more complicated. We do so through a specific team that goes and does face-in-face many of those paperwork things for you, but those obviously could be invested in terms of tech solutions, and we want to be part of the solution, and we want to we are proposing to develop some solutions that could be used by anyone, not only us, etc. But those are some of the conversations and proposals that we have on the table that we expect to be able to push through someday. But it's certainly much more proactive game that we're playing on the policy side in Kavak relative to Uber, which were unfortunately we had to play a lot of defense, frankly.
Yeah, great to hear. Thank you for that. And what I hear from all three of you is, as entrepreneurs, it's, the environment that you got is the one you have to deal with. You can't pick and choose. You can't just pick up and say, now I'm going to do the same thing in Colombia. So it's great to hear that you're all navigating. It's great to hear that it's not disrupting you. And hopefully as a civil society and as the business society, we can continue like pushing back and saying, some changes are warranted, but major changes can be disruptive. So good to hear from that. Francisco Sosa, another one of our participants, he's a Mexican fintech and compliance lawyer. So I guess caveat is none of you here have your legal counsel at your sides to advise you, but he has a question that just says, what's the new taxation law in Mexico going to affect your business? So you say, you can answer, I've got no idea. Or if you have something to that, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to answer without a lawyer at my side.
I have no idea.
Calling my lawyer right now. I would say we were evaluating also. I have no idea.
No idea. Kirsten?
Sorry, it's the same.
All right. So I guess
Apologies.
a lawyer question receives a lawyer's answer, which is I'll get back to you after I talk to my legal counsel. Santiago de Regil, another one of our participants, is asking, what do you think that these online platforms will help to penetrate the bottom of the pyramid in Mexico? It's a huge market. It's still very, very underserved. He's thinking more about fintech, but how do we bring in the billion that's being left behind in all of this? Because I see that a lot of what's happening in health tech and ed tech and all of that, it tends to be people who have an internet connection, who have a mobile phone, who have a credit card. But if you don't have those three, this basically doesn't exist for you. So I'll leave it open to see who wants to answer, but what are you doing? What are you seeing there? And what are you feeling as to what can happen going forward?
I think it's a really relevant question for education, for sure. We really focus right now on the master's population, and it's sort of more middle to higher income. Although a lot of our students are choosing, for example, not to go abroad for a master's because it is so expensive, especially with current exchange rates and other factors. But that being said, I think just as somebody working in education and I've been in education for several years, always at the higher education level, but it's something that personally I think is a super relevant and super important question. So I think, Eric, you hit the nail on the head. We, I think, have a challenge to address around some basic levels of connectivity right now. Around, does every household have a computer if kids are all, and most are still, doing school remotely? Or are they trying to learn, share one family television to watch television of their classes, and then they have a brother or sister who's in a different year, a different grade, and so as a family you're deciding who gets to watch their school that day. It's a question that the family shouldn't have to grapple with. And so I think we've got some major challenges to face on all of these topics. But I think, there's not an easy solution to any of these. It's unfortunately, it's an expensive proposition for anyone to address the entire educational system.
Thank you. Anybody to add? Ricardo, what do you guys think?
Yes, okay. I think it will take time. I think time here is key. We've seen online devices, internet connection growing a lot in Mexico, but we are not seeing bancarization growing at the same speed. So we are in an economy where more than 50% of the economy is in cash. So it's difficult to bring people to adopt online solutions if they just manage cash, right? So, for example, in our business, which is not for the bottom of the pyramid, we had to adopt cash. So right now, more than 30% of our transactions are in cash. And it's a challenge also for the business, because imagine if you deliver, in my case, but imagine delivering 100,000 orders per day, which is not the case right now, but it will be, and manage 30,000 orders in cash per day. It's very difficult, it's very dangerous, it's not safe. I think very few companies are okay with that, and the ones that are okay with that are not online. So I think we have a big gap here. We need to work on that, and I think it's one of the main reasons I don't see the incentives in the economy right now to migrate from cash to not cash. I don't see the incentives. I see several companies trying to help in this in our ecosystem, but I have this doubt. I think it will take time, several years, not one, not two, not five, maybe 10 tomorrow. But it's difficult. But I think our community is here to improve the quality of people in the bottom of the pyramid. But we need to figure out how we can support these companies and these initiatives.
Interesting comment on the cash, because the US and Canada, a lot of parts of Europe have really become cashless societies. It looks like Mexico's further back. Federico, are you seeing any cash purchases for cars, or what's your take on that question?
Yeah, we do. I think my take on the question is it's a really hard problem to solve. But one that, given how complex it is, if it's not us that are being part of the solution or are playing a specific role to drive the innovations out there, then who will be, right? And I think that we see examples all over. Ricardo mentions an excellent one. Let me point out to two. Uber is a very natural example, right? We made the big bold bet to launch cash after a couple of years in Mexico. And everyone was like, you guys are going backward. You're like, where are you doing this? And it's going to be so hard, and it's going to be so unsafe, etc. But it was really an access strategy. And what I mean by that is, literally, there were people that were marginalized, that pushing a button and getting a ride was not a possibility for them because they didn't have a card. And what you see is that as an adoption strategy to capture some of these customers and have them educate them, almost like take it by the hand, to see how they can, transact through their smartphones. And then through the innovation and availability of products like e-wallets, which you can, by the way, prepay with cash if you're comfortable with doing so, or prepaid cards, or some other sorts of fintech products that we continue to see innovations all over around. We see people migrating away from cash after they start transacting with you and trusting your business, right? But the solution is not to close the door on those people. It's to open doors for them and then migrate into other payment methods through trust and through innovation and through their entire life cycle journeys, right? And in Kavak, many of the paradigms that we have been breaking here is that notion that financing used vehicles was not a business at all, right? And as a result of that, you see a market where only 5% of sales are financed. And what we're doing, particularly to finance close to 60% of our sales, is investing really heavily in fintech and obviously taking some risks, but also being super customer obsessed. So, profiling every client and depending on their need and their capability, we will find a solution for you, and we will be very flexible. And it is in our best interest that you do well. Why? Because you have a car that we bought, we inspected, we reconditioned, we sold, we are providing the warranties to those cars and the annual services on that. So we can see how not only you are behaving, but we can see how the asset is behaving. And based on that, we can take clients that will have suboptimal conditions from the get-go. Why? Because obviously they were unbanked and they didn't have any credit history, etc. But we will give them a choice. And we will say, if you take good care of this and you behave well, we will be proactive to help you progress into that. So imagine what that means to people that have been marginalized in the economy entirely, that are doing many times what is their first big asset being purchased because they're not homeowners, but that they will start to construct a credit history. And here's the beauty, and then these two stories tie together. We're doing a partnership with Uber right now, where the Uber drivers, 50% of them were unemployed and 70% of them were in the informal economy. So they have no history, but we are financing vehicles for them based on the history that they have on the Uber platform. And that's when the synergies and magic starts to happen, right? And this literally, you know, I get goosebumps when I speak about this because I've seen that problem in the face of drivers every day. I've seen how they pay, you know, 2x what they should for a finance vehicle, for a vehicle that they are renting that will never be theirs. But now that they have driven for the platform for 2 years and they have certain status and certain discipline and certain behavior, you know, we will bet on you. And that's what we're doing. And that's some of the innovations that we see will definitely change this. It might take years. It will be operationally complex. It will be capital intensive. But guys, we have to be part of the solution.
For sure. That's a great point. And here, Ricardo Carvalho, booth MBA 15 has a question. He first thanks you all for your time. And expanding on Uber, right? He says, how bullish are you and your investors on the marketplace model? Uber Rides and Uber Eats, hugely popular marketplaces, have taken a long time and a lot of capital to turn a profit. How are you adjusting your model? So I think, you know, Uber plays a big role in Mexico. And what are you thinking about the marketplace model?
I'm biased. I'll let you guys answer.
Okay. I mean, I like all the sharing economy models. I'm an Airbnb host myself, so I love the model. So I believe it help you monetize things that you can't otherwise. But on the other hand, my business is totally opposite, right? It's super capital intensive. I have warehouses. I'm trying to build we are trying to build a barrier to entrance. So it's difficult for us now. It's taking a lot of money, a lot of effort. We are building our infrastructures, but once it's done, we believe that this will become a barrier to enter to other players. On the other side, the sharing economy, I don't know if I got it right, but I see as and Fede could give his opinion much better than mine, but I believe at the end you are building, you are pouring money into a solution that is, the solution is easily replicated. I mean, the solution is easily replicated, but at the end you are spending money on acquisition on the one side and demand on the other side. So I like the model, but I believe the barriers to entrance are not that much, because at the end you are pouring money on the demand and supply ends. But I'm not so sure if I'm getting it right or not. I would love to hear Fede.
I mean, similar to you, our model is not a P2P marketplace, right? We're a C2B2C model, but the reason why we do so is not because of economics. Actually, we do see some players in Latam and actually worldwide, some of them are even public in the US, that have very interesting economics with a P2P marketplace model. The reality and the reason for which we chose to do a C2B2C capital intensive, operationally complex model is because that was the only way that we would feel comfortable doing what is a saying of ours, which is we only sell vehicles we would feel comfortable selling to our moms. And what that means is we really have to go deep at inspecting the vehicle mechanically and legally. We have to invest between 15 and 20,000 pesos in each of those vehicles to extend their lifetimes. We have to be comfortable with providing a warranty and an optional extended warranty for those vehicles, because we know that they will function well. And those speak to some of the most prevalent issues, most of them related to safety and trust that we wouldn't feel comfortable solving with another model. So it's not related to economics. What I do think about the P2P marketplace model in terms of rights and needs, it is that there are some players that have proven and will continue to prove much more pervasively that this model works. And I think the Uber story is funny because all you hear in the headlines is that they continue to lose money, etc. But when you look at the curves per country and the economics per region and per business model in their public statements, etc., you can see that there are some very interesting trends. Many of the countries are profitable, and those barriers might be related to a certain liquidity effect. So it's hard to achieve. It might be easy to replicate the model, but it will be very hard to replicate the liquidity and the supply and demand side for you to be able, for example, to push a button and get it right in any place of the city and any time of the day, right? And then on top of that, there are other benefits in terms of safety and loyalty, etc., that will make this models much stickier, right? So I'm bullish on those models if they are done well, if they invest heavily in those marketplace balances and liquidity effects, because that I think is the highest barrier for entry, and complemented with some of the value props which correspond to what supply and demand in those marketplaces cares most about. Once you develop those are stickiness strategies which will make it harder for others to replicate, right? And you could say the same thing about an Amazon, right? And why is it so sticky and so successful? It's certainly a model like that in many ways, although they also have a retail channel, but I won't switch from Amazon, sorry. So they have certainly got, I mean, I think many more models with huge scale and benefits will continue to do so.
Yeah, for sure. I hear all of you saying, you know, focus on the customer, make the customer happy, having a product that, you know, you'd be willing to sell to your mother. I think that's a key to success. I think that maybe the US has a different dynamic, and maybe you can go fast and furious. And I think I hear all of you wanting to go fast, but I think there's more of a, how do I institutionalize this correctly? How do I make sure the customer's happy? How do I make sure that, you know, I'm figuring out how to put in cash when that's what the market needs, right? And maybe in the US, it would say, forget about cash, you know, that's, you know, I'm not even gonna do that. So it's great to hear. And I echo that. I think that if you always put the customer front and center, you're gonna be doing well. So we have a lot more questions than we have time for, and I think we have 2 minutes left. So I'm gonna leave the last one, and you can answer with one idea. And the last question is, what's the next big thing for Latam? And I'll start with Kristen, then Federico, and we'll finish off with Ricardo. But in a couple of words, what's that big next thing that we're going to see in Latin America?
Question. But I think that you're going to see an growing base of consumer businesses that are able to be highly customized, delivered to your door with a selection that's never been here before. But I think you're going to see those hitting on really core industries, things like food and justo, or transportation or education, where those are still the core of the economy today.
Thank you.
I'd say data science, and be that data science internally or data science as a service, as an industry in and of itself. But simply, it is the biggest competitive advantage that you can have out there today, right? We don't think of ourselves as a used car company. We think of ourselves as a tech and data science company that uses that to enable and empower people through the used car industry. But we use that in everything we do, from the pricing algorithms, which are really hard to create and replicate in a market that is highly liquid, highly fragmented, et cetera, to our, you know, production cost prediction models in terms of what we're trying to anticipate that we will have to invest in a vehicle, to our, you know, anticipated issues that could occur in a warranty or an extended warranty, to balance, you know, the ability to pass on the most value to the consumer, but also be sustainable, et cetera. It's simply the biggest competitive lever out there. And I think we're seeing more and more signs of those data science and AI models being used out there. And I think that's going to be the future in everything and anything that we do in any industry.
Sounds like your children, if and when you have them, they're going to study that. That's good to hear.
Hopefully, we'll see.
Ricardo?
No, I believe all industries that haven't changed in a while. So, for example, groceries is an industry that, if you think about you buying in the supermarket when you were a kid and nowadays, is the same experience. So I think there is a huge opportunity there. That's why we are there. But also many other industries, prop tech. So I think there are several things to do there, healthcare as well. So I would take these three.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. We're out of time, right spot at the top of the hour. You're all super busy doing very important things, really driving the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Mexico forward, and keeping the Booth brand name up high and center. So we thank you for that, and we wish you the best of luck. And thank you for everybody that connected. Hopefully, you will connect to a new one of these panels in the next couple of months. Thank you.
And thank you to all of our speakers and especially our moderator, Eric. This was really fantastic. Thank you all so much and have a great rest of your day.